Hey everybody, Dave Hagan here. Another 1% surcharge on a bill when you pay for a meal? That's today on the Financial Wellness Podcast.
Welcome to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to the financial success. Here is your host, financial problem solver and talk show host, Dave Hagan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Financial Wellness Podcast, or the TFWP, as we like to call it. We're coming to you from beautiful downtown Van Nuys Uncle Studios. With me today, as always, Mr. Brian Reed.
Buenos dias, David.
Buenos dias, senor. Don't take me too far down that road. My second language skills are a bit limited.
That's okay. I just topped out there.
You topped out.
There
I thought
go.
you were going to be covering for me.
No.
I should have paid much more attention in high school. What can I say? Oh my goodness. I want to talk today about this 1% surcharge. Brian, you're not going to believe that we just talked about it a couple seconds ago for the first time. You're not going to believe this. You know, we've talked about the surcharges that everybody wants to put on the various bills that we have. We talked about it in terms of going to a restaurant and they charge you for a, employee health care charge, or going to a restaurant and they charge you for a hospitality fee, which means they want you to pay for the dancer in the next room or whatever it is. Crazy stuff. And now at some restaurants, a 1% add-on is being stuck onto your bill that's called a Restore California surcharge. A Restore California surcharge. A fee that's intended to assist in efforts against climate change. I don't know. This isn't a tax.
This is okay.
Who does this? Who gets away with this?
You got to keep going. I need more information.
All right.
Go off on this.
So in 2019, the California Department of Food and Agriculture and the California Air Resources Board, both governmental agencies, by the way, announced that they'd partnered with a San Francisco nonprofit called the Perennial Farming Initiative, and the collaboration is called Restore California. It's intended to help local farmers implement climate beneficial farming practices via a series of grants. It actually says it on the website. I went and looked through this website, and they're going to give money to farmers to help them implement climate beneficial farming practices, which is a good thing, but why are we paying for it? So in addition to grants to farmers, the money is going to be collected by California restaurants, and it's going to go towards other existing programs intended to improve soil health and fight climate change. So now we're paying for health care, and now we're paying for entertainment in the next room, and we're paying for improving soil health. By the way, all of which are good things.
Yeah, on the surface, all of this sounds on the up and up, but has California stopped giving subsidies to farmers?
I'm sure California's handing out all sorts of money for this and that, especially with the current administration. But the point is, one, this strikes me as kind of ambiguous. Two, farmers are going to apply for grants, and three, it's just being put on the bill without us, Yeah,
it's not a tax.
It's not a tax. It's like a voluntary. Somehow this has become okay. But we live in an era of cable TV charges where, it's $44 a month for a year, and then it goes up. I mean, less and less
Are
truth.
they trying to shame us into...
Oh, absolutely. Because you get the bill. Let's say, you've had a real nice dinner. You're in a foo-foo restaurant up in San Fran, or there's even a place down here in L.A. Let's say you got a date, and the bill comes, and, you're trying to impress the date, and you go, I don't want to pay that 1%. You're going to look like a real weenie, huh? I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. Now, how they're going to get the money out to the farmers isn't that clear, and the grant application deadline was just a month ago, and they aren't going to start handing out money for 4 or 5 months. And
who defines what beneficial farming practices are?
I don't know. Now, to their credit, it is a 501c3, so they've put together a nonprofit entity, and someone's going to be overlooking this. I would assume the federal government if they're tax exempt, but I don't know. And as part of this partnership, the California restaurants that are participating in this are invited to add an optional 1%. And yeah, you can ask that it be removed, and I'm assuming that they would remove it right away. But they're going to add it onto your check. You got to look every single time. According to Restore California, their website at least, with a $97 billion restaurant industry, if only 1% of the state's restaurants implemented the surcharge, it would generate $10 million in the first year alone. So we're talking about some pretty serious amounts of money,
I would like there to be a Restore Brian fund, and I would like 1%, and I'm pretty sure you would like 1% as well.
Yeah. Well, I'd want 1.5.
Well,
it's crazy. Now, originally, these were thought to be mostly upscale San Francisco restaurants. So we could at least pass it off on that NorCal thing is, they're a little more liberal, but. Now it's California fufu restaurants, but it's restaurants going into Colorado, Oregon, New York, Denmark, Hong Kong, Spain, Italy, Mexico. Take a look at the list, Brian, that I gave you. This big long list of all these restaurants. I mean, this is not insubstantial. The people that are buying into this. And they're just going to pop the 1%er there on the bill and forward it along. Crazy.
What? This is happening in all of these states as well? There's a Restore New York, a Restore Colorado, a Restore...
Yep. Spain, Brazil, Australia, Italy, Denmark, which is kind of interesting, Hong Kong. Pretty interesting stuff.
I have so many questions about this. Is this...
I love blowing you away with stuff.
Is there a sign on the door?
That
says our restaurant supports the Restore X movement, where 1% will be added?
I have no idea. I don't go to these kind of fancy restaurants. I would imagine there's a logo, because there is a logo on the website. So I would imagine that there's some kind of logo, and I would hope to gosh that there's something on the menu. But again, I'd like a steak medium rare with the potato and all the stuff on the side, and I don't want to pay 1%. It's not cool.
Yeah, and it's not the 1%. It's just doing it without fully notifying.
And what's 1% on a bill? I mean, hardly even worth the discussion.
Yeah.
But it's wrong. Now, they are getting some pushback. Apparently, there's a restaurant up in the Mission District up in San Fran, and they've already removed the surcharge, and the owner was quoted as saying, having that additional surcharge on there, I think, made a lot of people feel uncomfortable. And they went on to say too many diners pose questions in a negative way, which is what I would do. Mm-hmm. A question like, what is this crap? And that's a little negative, only a little bit. And so the restaurant decided to drop it. What they decided to do, actually, was raise the price slightly and forward the 1% on out of their operating budget. Now, if they want to do that, I'm totally cool with that. And they should even put something on their menu that says, hey, we do this. But to ask somebody to, to put it on the bill and then have them send along, it's a little much. It's like when you go to the store and they go, oh, do you want to, at the market, do you want to give some money to March of Dimes or whatever the charity is? And I go, no, because they're going to collect that money and they're going to go, oh, look, Pavilions gave this money to us. Like, no, wait a minute. Give me credit for the $1.98, Yeah. To say nothing of all the other nonprofit stuff you do, but it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. The California Restaurant Association, which is a statewide lobbying group, has been also a little cautious about that. They've said this seems like a group of well-intentioned people finding another way to use a surcharge. but it's way too early to know if the program will catch. I mean, the nerve to see if it catches. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember a tip was 10%. And the big push was, well, we're going to 15. So now we all have to do that 10% plus half again to figure out the tip, right? Or if you're like someone from the generation above us, they go, do you have that tip card? And they get that out, which is cute, but it's not really the way that our gen does it.
No, it's all on the phone anyway.
Exactly. But the nerve of these people, why support their cause? Why should you support someone else's philanthropic thing? And I would argue it's maybe not even necessarily philanthropic vis-a-vis the restaurants. They're talking about enhancing ways of production and working with the farmers who are their suppliers or vendors and blah, blah. I don't know how philanthropic that is, you know?
And doesn't it just make more financial sense to go and donate to them directly so you get the tax write-off?
I mean, I hadn't even thought about that. Now you're blowing me away. Exactly. If it's a 501c3, you could take the deduction. Absolutely.
So now you're throwing away a tax deduction by agreeing to sign the receipt.
Yeah.
Just saying, no, I'll do it at the end of the year.
Of course, if you're adding up $1.95 tax deductions, we could argue that person needs a life. But it's crazy to me, just absolutely crazy to me. And we're seeing more and more of this. It's just so appalling what people think they can get away with. You know, we went to up to a local ski area, and I heard that they had the city council had something that they got into with a developer, and the developer sued him and got a big judgment. Well, how does the city cover a big multi-million-dollar judgment against it? Well, when we were up there recently, you look at your receipt when when you go into a store and buy something, and it says, city fee. Well, they're charging off the customers for their screw up. Oh my gosh!
Somebody's got to pay for it, and it's not going to be us.
And I guess, but I mean, oh my goodness gracious, what people get away with or try to get away with. It just drives me absolutely crazy. So now that I've vented a little bit, now that I feel a little better, what's a takeaway for our TFWP listeners? I think one would be, you need to check the menu, or maybe as you walk in the door, see what credit cards they take, what their hours are, and whether they're, part of this cooperative.
What other fees are going to be added in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quote unquote, voluntarily.
Yeah, and you need to check the menu. I never check the, hey, this is about our restaurant, or I start looking for the food. I'm a bottom line kind of guy, right? But you're going to have to look around. You're going to have to see whether it's, mandatory, like the ski resort thing, or whether it's something that's voluntary, and how much is it going to be. Two, I think you need to check the check when it comes.
Yeah, this isn't about the money. This is just about the audacity to go ahead and try and
collect the money.
It's principle. Automatically.
Yeah, it's principle.
Not going to happen.
And if you're anything other than a date, then you just go, hey, if it's a date, maybe you just suck it up and.
Yeah, it's a buck. I wouldn't even bring it up.
But yeah,
couple bucks.
I have a couple times. The local restaurant that puts the thing on there for the healthcare. Mm-hmm. And I said, I want you people to have healthcare, but just add it into the cost of doing business. Don't surcharge me. It's not up to me to pay your people's healthcare. I mean, I even question whether it's up to a business to pay for employees' healthcare. But that's a different
topic.
Political discussion and topic. But to try and pass it off on me, that makes no sense. I want to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges when I go out for a meal and shop for a couple of eggs or a steak. And I think the third thing is you need to politely express your opposition or ask that it be removed. And it doesn't have to be a big negative thing, but I think it could be, polite.
It's a shame element. They're going, you don't support climate awareness and taking care of our planet for the future?
Yeah, and they would say, well, what's wrong with you? And I say, no, what's wrong with you? And it really makes you wonder. I got to tell you, I had a similar thing going into a restaurant just a couple of weeks ago. We went into a restaurant. They had like a little glassed off room where we were going to have a business meal over a nice steak, and we wanted to go into the glass room just to have some quiet because sometimes it's hard to talk in a restaurant. So we go in, thing on the door. Well, the glass room is used up. We're filming like a show. Mm-hmm. And so, well, okay, so we'll sit in the main restaurant. Everybody was already there. So then we sit down, and they go, well, we need you to sign this release because we're filming. And I said, well, wait a minute. We just sat down for a steak restaurant, an expensive steak restaurant, to talk about business, and you want me to sign this release? They go, yeah. And I said, well, let me look at this. Name, address, birth date, phone number, 2 pages of single space release language, including language that says if there's ever an issue, I will indemnify them, blah, blah. I said, I sat down at this nice restaurant to relax. Here's my glass of red wine.
I just wanted a steak.
You want me to read this release? What is wrong with you? So I signed it, and it wasn't my name, and I didn't read it. And the person comes by and collects them, and they were pretty adamant about it. One of the production assistants, and then they come back and they say, well, we've been told that we need to take a picture of everybody holding up your agreement so we know. And I said, now you want to take a picture of me after I've read the release?
Sure, I'm union and I need to be paid if I appear in this.
I could care less about being in the background, and I even would have completely behaved, but that you're like getting harassed at a steak restaurant? Incredible. Anyway, it's amazing what people will think that they can get away with, what they can try to get you to do, especially when you're out to have a nice steak and relax.
Look, I went to a Jesuit high school, and I'm not, I've heard that this is a Jesuit phrase. I'm not sure it is or not, but it's much easier to get forgiveness than permission. Wow. And that's what they're doing.
So true.
They're going to go, okay, sorry, versus, hey, are you willing to sign this? No, it's you have to sign this. That's what happened to you there.
And, we ended up changing tables. And you know what? Probably won't go back.
Not going back.
And in our neck of the woods, the steak dinner place, pretty competitive industry. So,
again, hashtag first world problems. But there's a slippery slope where if all of a sudden things will be, before it's thought through, it's just going to happen.
Right.
And people are going to start, again, full-time shaming,
Yeah.
Do it.
But nicely and politely express your opposition. Now, I got to tell you, by the time we got back to the guy, by the time the guys go, we want to take your picture holding up a contract. It's like, no, I'm not nice anymore. My wife's going, just like, no, absolutely not. So, you go to a restaurant, look what's on the door. Look what's on the menu. Look what's on the check. I'm afraid that's kind of what it's coming to. And again, it's not the money. It's the principle.
It's the principle.
It's just the principle of it. So all of you TFWPers out there, keep your eyes open, pay attention, and don't be afraid to express your polite opposition to some stuff like that, because it's only going to get worse.
Got to stop it now.
Yeah. This is Dave Hagan, and you are listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button, or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications. Let's listen in now as Dave answers some emails.
All right, we've got an interesting email, a little different kind of email today. So, Brian, why don't you read that for us?
Yeah, it's an interesting damage control email, I guess. This is from Jeremy, and he writes in, Dear Dave, one topic that could help your subscribers is that when times are hard and they really have to choose which bills to pay and which they should not pay, Now, my opinion is when in doubt, pay the mortgage on time. I've been able to get financing for families who let themselves get behind on their credit cards. But the mortgage, your home, is the most important thing. Don't get behind on that. It's much harder to recover. I believe you want to have a paid off home by the time you retire, ideally. So when in doubt, keep up the payments on your house. Everything else is recoverable. Thanks, Jeremy.
All right. Well, first of all, a full disclosure. I know Jeremy. I spoke with Jeremy just this past week, and he works with a mortgage broker. So he's sending in something with his unique perspective. And when I was talking to him, we kind of conversation went to financial wellness, and as so many times when I talk with people, it does. And I asked him for any ideas he might think of. In fact, we talked about maybe doing a show about how to prepare yourself to buy a house, how to get ready to buy a house, because I thought he'd have a lot of interesting input as he's getting loans and stuff for people. So, this isn't more of an idea than a question to answer. But what I would say is, and what I see this question is really what to pay first in an emergency. Mm-hmm. And of course, the obvious answer is always to pay everything on time the very best you can. That's best for your credit. It's what you've agreed to do, et cetera, et cetera. But if something happens and you cannot, something happens to the economy that it stops, or you become disabled and have minimal disability payments that you're living on, or something like that, what would be the hierarchy of things? Well, not first and foremost housing. To me, first and foremost would be if you've got a tax installment payment plan with the IRS, mm-hmm. I'd pay them first. Because if you don't, they're going to say the full amount's due, and they can come get you pretty quick. They don't have to sue you. They don't have to do anything. They'll just go get your bank account. They'll just lien property. They'll do whatever they got to do. So to the extent that you can, I would certainly pay on an installment plan payment first. That's not your taxes as they're becoming due. Mm-hmm. That's if your taxes were past due and you're catching up. Secondly, I'd pay housing and utility. And yeah, I would pay the mortgage. A bank can foreclose in California in 111 days. That's like 3.5 months. That doesn't take long at all. If you don't pay your rent, the other form of housing payment, they can file an unlawful detainer if you don't pay within just 3 days. 3 days. So, then you got a lawsuit, and then you got a trial, and blah, blah. So those two have very short response time. So yeah, I would take care of your housing. And of course, I would take care of your utility payments, because you don't want them to, turn off the water or something, because the neighbor's not going to be happy if they catch you out there taking a shower with the hose, So those would be the next thing, and that I would take care of. Housing and utility second. Third, the car payment. You want to avoid any kind of risk of repo. And in California, it varies a little bit from state to state. But in California, you don't make your payment. They just send out some guy who basically, can legally steal the truck, that your vehicle, and the truck shows up, and they hook it and drag it away, and that's the end of that. They'll repo it. So to the extent that you can take care of the first two, then take care of the car payment, and then after that, it's like all else. Personal loans will usually give you some slack. Credit cards, there's not much that they can do. If you don't pay, they'll call and bug you for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and then they'll sue, and hopefully you're going to be well back on your way by then. So I wouldn't worry about that as much. And I think that Jeremy's point is, from a credit point of view, if you subsequently apply for a credit, and remember, we've always said your credit report is not as critical as people make it out to be, unless you're trying to get a car loan, which hopefully you're not, or if you're trying to get a house loan, which people will do a couple times during their life. He says that it's easier to overcome or explain away or deal with late credit card payments as opposed to late mortgage payments. So if that's really the case, yeah, that fits in with our hierarchy, I think just as well. And this isn't, he shouldn't consider this, like legal advice. I'm giving general advice, and anyone with any specific questions on this should certainly consult with an attorney. But this is just kind of general advice, the general hierarchy of creditors that can bother you, and the timelines in which they can do it, at least under California law. Now, the other thing I thought was interesting in his email, he's talking about, you want to have your house paid off by the time you retire, ideally. Well, yeah, for most people, but for a lot of people, maybe they don't want to have a house. Someone that moves around a lot doesn't want to have a house. In fact, if you move around from city to city as part of your job while you're working, you don't want to have a house because your investment's going to shrink by 6%, which is the real estate commission every time you move. And so whatever your investment has gained is going to be trimmed off when you move. So there are some people that maybe don't want to have a house, that don't want to have it paid for. Of course, if you don't have a house that's paid for when you retire, it's nice to have a little more money around to pay the rent. That's one of the reasons that our 5 steps to financial success don't include, hey, buy a house, because it's not right for everybody. There's 5 other things that you need to do, and by the time you get those 5 things accomplished, and by the way, if you don't remember what those 5 steps are, listen to last week's podcast where we talked about those 5 steps again, probably for the second or third time in as many years. But listen to that, and some people aren't going to want to own. I mean, some people just don't want to put up with the upkeep and the property taxes and all, and there's nothing wrong with that. Owning a home is not a goal for everybody. So, I differ a little bit with Jeremy there, but I think that you want to keep your credit as reasonably clean as you can so that if you decide to buy some real estate at some point, you can do that. So I think that that's the point of Jeremy's comment there. So if you are interested in hearing us talk about how to prepare yourself to buy a house, some things to think about in terms of, down payment, investment, and real estate people to talk to and get a mortgage, let us know, and we will put together a podcast that will cover those kinds of issues. That's something I really didn't think about until this week, and I think that could be a really interesting a podcast to spend some time on, talk about.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
Yeah. Hey, Jeremy, thanks a lot for the email, and we'll see if we can get you on the show here somewhere down the line to talk about these kinds of things. Well, that's all the time that we have. Tune in next week. We're going to talk about 9 steps to a better day at work. Some interesting things to think about. So we'll talk to you next week. This is Dave Hagan, and you've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button, or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. Remember, Dave will randomly draw from the submitted questions and pick the winner of a free 1-hour personal conversation with Dave to help you achieve your financial goals. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications, or share the podcast via the app with your family and friends. This is your announcer, Nick Appel, wishing you every financial success.